Have you ever lived in such calm routine that you start believing nothing, not a person, not an organization, not even fate, could ever disturb the peace you've built around your home? That was me, completely unaware that the biggest threat to my property wasn't a thief, a natural disaster, or some random accident, but the very HOA that claimed to protect our neighborhood. It all started with one envelope, just one, sitting in my mailbox like it had every right to be there. The paper felt heavier than usual, and as I tore it open, I swear a strange discomfort crailed up my spine. Inside was a letter wrapped in sugary language about a community garden initiative meant to enhance the beauty and collective value of the area. Nice words, right? But underneath all that poetic nonsense was a single line that made my heart stop. The proposed garden would be located on a thin stretch of land that, according to them, was adjacent to HOA-managed space. Adjacent? I knew my deed. I knew my boundaries. That wasn't adjacent land. That was my land. Still, I wanted to believe it was a simple mapping mistake, maybe a technical glitch, or maybe someone typed the wrong coordinates. So I reread the letter. And the more I read, the more the sugar dissolved, revealing nothing but threat. Mandatory compliance. Final notice before action. Failure to cooperate may result in penalties. That wasn't a request. That was an ultimatum dressed like a flower bouquet. I decided to show up at the next HOA meeting, still giving them the benefit of the doubt. But the moment I walked into that room, the silence felt rehearsed. The board members looked like actors who suddenly forgot their lines. Some wouldn't even look at me. Others gave tight-lipped smiles that felt less like welcome and more like warning. When I calmly asked for clarification, the board circled me with vague responses, phrases like standard procedure, minor land adjustment, and community-approved initiative, even though not one homeowner I'd spoken to had heard a single word about it. And then came the slip-up. One board member, clearly irritated by my persistence, muttered under his breath, "This wouldn't be happening if the walkway plan had stayed private." And just like that, he froze, his eyes widening, his lips pressing shut, as though he wanted to yank his own words back out of the air. That was my turning point. I went home, shut the door, and spread every legal paper I owned across the dining table. My deed, boundary survey, old HOA maps, meeting minutes, archived newsletters, emails, everything. The deeper I dug, the uglier the truth became. The community garden wasn't for the community at all. It was a disguise, nothing more than a pleasant-sounding cover for a private project one board member was pushing. A scenic walkway designed to boost the curb appeal and value of his home. And the most convenient route for that walkway? Right through my land. They weren't confused. They weren't mistaken. They were hoping I'd be too naive, too intimidated, or too overwhelmed to push back. And once that walkway went in, it would be nearly impossible to reclaim the land. That night, as I sat surrounded by documents, something inside me hardened. They thought I would fold under pressure. They thought I was just another quiet homeowner who would obey without question. They thought wrong. I organized everything into a thick binder, the kind lawyers slap onto desks in courtroom dramas, and returned to the next meeting with the calmest anger I've ever felt. When they opened the floor for questions, I didn't raise my voice. I simply laid the binder on the table, flipped it open, and let the evidence speak for itself. Boundary lines clearly marked in my name. HOA rules they violated. Emails they intentionally never sent. Minutes they forgot to publish. Financial documents showing suspicious expenses tied to preliminary garden planning. And as I talked, the room shifted. Homeowners began murmuring, leaning forward, whispering to each other. One homeowner even stood up and asked why they weren't notified of any garden vote. Another demanded to know why a private walkway was being pushed with HOA funds. A third asked if this was even legal. And the board, they melted, Excuses poured out like water from a broken pipe. Words like miscommunication, clerical error, premature planning. But none of it landed. Homeowners were done being fooled. Then something unexpected happened. A board member who had been quiet the entire time suddenly spoke up, not to defend the board, but to expose them. She admitted that two members had held private discussions about shared property enhancements without the rest of the board present. She admitted that the walkway idea had been pitched as a personal project disguised as a community upgrade. And she admitted that the garden was a strategic label used to justify the land acquisition. The room erupted. People were angry, rightfully angry, not just for me, but for every rule they'd followed while the board twisted those rules for their gain. Within a week, the garden proposal was abruptly removed from all agendas. Within 2 weeks, the board member who orchestrated the scheme resigned for personal reasons. And within a month, every homeowner received a new policy update requiring transparent votes for any land use change. I kept my land. I kept my peace. But I also kept the lesson that came with it. Sometimes the biggest threats to your home wear badges of authority and smile in your face while planning behind your back. HOAs can claim to protect property values, but sometimes the only property value they care about is their own. So if you ever get a letter wrapped in fake friendliness promising community improvement, don't just read it, investigate it. Because sometimes the flower garden they want to build is nothing more than a mask for a power grab. And sometimes the most dangerous weeds aren't in your yard, they're sitting on the HOA board.